So we're in your government book in chapter 4, the end of the chapter, where it says Constitution at a glance. And I'm going to just focus on this where it says in brief again. But we're going to go over what is in our Constitution and what sets forth our form of government, right? So first of all, we look at Articles 1, 2, and 3. And you see they describe the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And these basically in the articles it will describe how the members of these branches, whether they're, whether they're a judge or whether they're a senator or a congressman or whether they're president of the United States. So how are these members chosen? How many votes does it take? How are they chosen to be members? How long do they serve? Are they serving for 4 years? Are they serving for 2 years? Are they serving serving for less? So the qualifications for each office. So what are the qualifications for each office? How old do they need to be? Do you need to be a citizen for how long do they need to be a citizen? Those kind of things. These are all important. So the qualification, the length they serve, how they're chosen are all under the first Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of our Constitution. Article 4 describes the relationships between the states to each other in the Constitution. So that's, Article 4 is important to know how the states relate to each other and to the Constitution. Article 5 is very important because it describes on making amendments or changes in the Constitution. There are 2 steps involved. The proposal, which is made by 2/3 of votes in both houses to propose a change in the Constitution. So 2/3 of votes in both houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, to propose. And then the ratification must be ratified by 3/4 of vote, 3/4 of the state legislators, they basically have a special convention, but still have 3/4 of the states. So this is an Article 5 describing how to amend the Constitution. On to Article 6, which is very important because it is the basically here says it's the linchpin of the Constitution. Article 6 basically saying that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and all the laws and judgments and everything have to go through the Constitution. So Article 7 sets forth, in the midst of Article 7, sets forth the ratification of the manner in which the Constitution shall be ratified. So those are the 7 articles. There's 7 articles. Remember, there's 7 articles. The first 3 have to do with the branches and how they're the qualifications. The next has to do with the states. The next has to do with amendments, the 5th Amendment, or the 5th making amendments or changes in the Constitution. The 6th is the linchpin of the whole thing under the supreme law of the land. And then, of course, the Article 7, which just says how the Constitution is ratified. So 10,000 amendments have come into Congress to amend. 10,000. Can you imagine if we had 10,000 amendments? But only 17 have been adopted since the Bill of Rights. Remember, the Bill of Rights is the first amendments here. We have a picture here. The Bill of Rights are those first amendments, those first 10 amendments. Since that time, we've only had 17 more. And that's, since the beginning of, the 18th century there, or I should say 2 centuries past. So, and 12 of these 17 have been ratified in the 20th century. So not many, although we've had 10,000 people, 10,000 amendments, 10,000 tries at amending the Constitution, only 17 have been adopted since, or adopted, I should say, since the beginning of the Constitution, where we first had our Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights are amendments to the Constitution. So let's go on how to amend the Constitution. So what process is it? So the process is presented here as we see. here's all these amendments here. Let's go on to the next. Here's the branches in the first 3 amendments, or the 3 articles of the Constitution. Going over all these. How to amend the Constitution. Okay, let's go over how to amend the Constitution really quickly here. I'm going to go over this picture here. So, first of all, proposing amendments. So you, by a 2/3 votes in both houses of Congress, you propose an amendment in the Constitution. So the traditional used only once. The 21st Amendment never used by 2/3. So the 2/3 vote of amendment, the traditional ways, it says basically you could see the red means never used, and then the blue means used. So what was never used? Basically, by national convention, we've never used a national convention called by Congress to request the 2/3 of states. We've always used basically just 2/3 vote in both Congress. We've never had a convention, although it says in our Constitution that they can have a convention. That's another method. So 2 ways of 2/3 votes. First of all, they can put forth a 2/3 vote in both houses, or they can have a convention. But they still have to have 2/3 vote. And like I said, we've never had a convention in this area. So to amend a Constitution, you can see ratifying amendments here. So the next stage is being ratifying amendments by the legislators of 3/4 of the states. There's 2 steps. First of all, they propose the amendments, then they ratify the amendments. Proposing has to be 2/3, but ratifying has to be 3/4. So 3/4 of the states. And they can do this by convention here, so we can see that this hasn't been used as a convention. So, and it's basically, in ratifying here, it says used for the 21st Amendment. You know, the amendment that was, what's the 21st? The amendment, the 18th, the amendment that was against prohibition of alcohol was one where they amended it, that amendment that was already made. So let's go on here. I want to go on to this last part, and then we'll go on to the questions, and we'll be finished with this chapter. And you can follow along, but I'm just going to go over The Spirit of Liberty by Daniel Webster. And this is so important as we go through the Spirit of Liberty. He says, the Spirit, and I'm going to go over part of this so you can read along, or I kind of skipped along about what he said here, but Daniel Webster says, the first objective of a free people is the preservation of their liberty. So our freedom, right? Liberty is only to be preserved by maintaining constitutional restraints and just divisions of political power. So he says the only way we can have liberty is to maintain our Constitution and the restraints of our Constitution, and how the power is divided between branches. That's how we can keep our freedom. He says it's dangerous to simplify government, and it's very deceptive too. The simplest of governments are despotisms, or tyranny, or monarchies. The next simple would be kings and queens. So the simplest government basically is when a dictator takes over, and the next simplest would be like a king taking over, and we don't want those. It says all republics of law must impose numerous limitations and qualifications of authority. We must have numerous limitations, or we'll end up with a dictator, right? Also, we must give positive and qualified rights. We must qualify our leaders, right? And subject them to the rules and regulations of this land. Even the President of the United States, the highest of our executive branch, needs rules and regulations. This is the very essence of a free political institution, right? That's what brings our freedom. He talks about what's called the spirit of liberty. What is the spirit of liberty? He says it's bold and fearless, but it also is a sharp-sighted spirit, cautious and far-sighted. So he's saying the spirit of liberty, yes, is bold and fearless. We can be bold and courageous, yes, but we also have to be sharp-sighted and very cautious in looking onto the future. We need to be jealous of power, because power comes from the encroachment of men, and we must demand checks and balances and seek our guards and insist on our securities, or we would be entrenched behind. We need to be entrenched behind strong forces and fortified with all possible care against what? The assaults of ambition and passion. So he's saying, if we don't fortify ourselves on this and stand behind, like we're standing behind the huge trenches and all these things, we're standing and fortifying ourselves with all of this care, we're going to be assaulted by what? Dictators and ambitious men with passion that want to take over with power, right? He says it does not trust true amiable weakness of human nature. So basically, we as the spirit of liberty shall not trust amiable human nature. Not to trust human nature, because human nature is deceitfully wicked beyond measure, he says. Though benevolence, good intent, and patriotic purchase may come along, it may look like it's good, it may look like it's patriotic, it may look like it's very benevolent or good for mankind, but when we look into it, we need to be careful, because if we don't go through the laws of the spirit through the spirit of liberty, we'll find ourselves deceived. It says, neither does it satisfy itself with flashy and temporary resistance to a legal authority. So when a legal authority comes in, it flashes and says, hey, look at us, look at communism, look at liberalism, hey, let's look here, let's look at this flashy thing over here. But if it doesn't respond and go through the legal way, then something is wrong. It seeks for duration and permanence. So the spirit of liberty wants to be the permanent of duration and to last for ages to come. We want that to be. So we must prevent, this amiable powers to come in and take over. He says this is the nature of constitutional liberty. This is our liberty, if we will rightly understand and preserve it. Every free government needs restraints. We need restraints. If we abolish the branches of our government, we won't have jury trials. We will abolish our legislation. Our law legislation will be given by one person, one despot, or one in the government power that has full on power. So with the executive power comes hazards. So when we simplify our executive power, that in charge, goes from being that person responsible to adhere to the Constitution or defend our Constitution. Instead, we have a person with all power to take us over. So he says there are clear lines of division here that we must be aware of, and these clear lines of division will prevent us from going in to full-on takeover, in that way. So we must have a continuance of a regulated liberty that depends on maintaining the boundaries of our government, the boundaries of our branches. The checks and balances are also important in our government. So that was Daniel Webster, but kind of like summarizes everything that we're talking about in this chapter. So let's go on to the last part. This is the last section, and we'll be done with chapter 4. And this is our section review. quick review here. It says, according to the Constitution's preamble, what are the 6 purposes of the Constitution? To form a more perfect union, to establish justice, to endure domestic equality, or domestic tranquility, I should say, to provide a common defense, to promote general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty. So, to form a more perfect union, to establish justice or righteousness, to ensure domestic tranquility, peace in our home, to provide a common defense, so we have somewhat military to defend us, and to promote our general welfare with the blessings of liberty. Great, it's all in the preamble. So, number 2, what form of government does Article 4 guarantee to all states entering the Union? So, basically, Article 4 guarantees to all the states that we have a Republican government. Every state will have a Republican government. So, when it talks about all states have to have representatives and have to have Republican government. Number 3, what 3 limits did the founders place in the Constitution to guard against absolute political power? Basically, federalism. Federalism means that we will have a federal government, which is our national government, and we'll have a state government, our state government of each state, and our local government. So that's federalism. And then that's number 1. And then the separation of powers, the separation of powers would be the executive branch and the legislative branch and the judicial branch. And then the checks and balances they have on each other, how each branch will check and balance each other. So federalism, separation of powers, and checks and balances are the 3 guards against absolute political power. What are 3 institutions of power within the United States government? Well, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches are the 3 branches, 3 institutions of power in our government. So number 5. What do articles, okay, now we're talking about articles. What do articles 1 through 3 of the Constitution describe? We went over that in this video. Basically, they describe the branches of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches and how these members are chosen, how long they serve, and their qualifications are all in these articles. So those are articles 1 through 3. 1, 2, 3, executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Number 6. What does Article 4 outline? Article 4 outlines what did we say? Is how the states are all Republican states and how the states relate to the government and to each other. So, number 4. What does Article 5? Article 5 is making amendment, is the amendment process to the Constitution. How do we amend the Constitution? That's all in basically proposing and ratifying an amendment. That's in Article 5. Article 6. Article 6, number 8 says Article 6 is the linchpin of everything, basically saying that that the Constitution will be the supreme law of the land. That any laws or any treaties or anything we have has to go through the laws of the Constitution, has to go through our Constitution. So that's the supreme. The judges in the federal and state will all come under the Constitution of the United States. Number 9 says that the 7th Amendment basically says how the Constitution shall be ratified. So it's the end. So we have 7 articles, right? And each article goes into description of all that I said here. And then we'll have the Bill of Rights, which would be attached, and that's our rights as individuals. And those start the amendments, which we have 27 amendments that go along with our Constitution. So I hope this was very good for you to really understand the Constitution. We're going to go into the next chapters on Congress, and which is the legislative branch, and we're going to go into the executive branch, and which is the president and vice president, and we're getting on to a bureaucracy of his cabinet and administrations that go with the executive branch. And then we're going to get into the judicial branch, and we're going on. This is going to be the rest, and going into the states and such. And that'll be what we're going to do in government this year. So, okay. Done with chapter 4.